Hello dear friends, how is it going? I hope I find you all in good health and safe and sound. Welcome, thank you for joining me here today. I'm Ari Theriger, and given the last month and the mood of the season, October, right? Spooky season. Well, for the first video of November, I really don't want to let go of the witchy atmosphere. Not just yet. So I would like to briefly speak of the Jinn or Jinn. I do think it's absolutely fascinating to dig through the belief systems of cultures and ethnic groups before Abrahamic religious influences, especially on animistic indigenous belief systems and for today's video, the geographical area which we so often call Middle East is barely explored when it comes to pre-Islamic or pre-Abrahamic and pre-Islamic belief systems, especially taking into consideration that in the past 20 years or so, there's been an active Islamophobic campaign. So very sadly, pre-Islamic animistic systems of belief are almost completely put aside. I actually had a patron who taught me pretty interesting stuff about pre-Islamic animism, and in part that's one of the reasons I am doing this video right here for that patron. But also, as some of you already know, I have a solo music project called Varum, and I really don't see myself as a musician, so calm down, even though, well, obviously, since it is a solo project, I'm the one composing and playing everything. I'm doing everything alone in this project, but I'm not a musician as a profession, right? Because this is just a hobby. So I'm more like a multi-instrumentalist, having fun composing and playing music. And this is a hobby I'm having absolutely loads of fun with. And from time to time, I do surprise myself, and I'm proud of some of my compositions, so I'll bring it up whenever I can and won't shut up about it. Sorry. But anyway, one of my most recent music works is called Oxymeron. The genre is metal, and one of the tracks is the host of Jinns. So I would like to take the opportunity to speak about them in video format, since recently such entities have inspired me to compose a particular track. So let's move into it, right? I think that for most of us, the first contact we have with the Jinn or genies was through the literature work, the folk tale Aladdin's Wonderful Lamp, or Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp from 1001 Nights, which is an account which heavily features the Jinn, but Aladdin's story is an 18th century Western addition to the text and lacks an authentic Arabic source. Now, something that many Muslims at least nowadays, refuse to admit, just like Christians, is that in their religious sources there's a lot of mentions of witchcraft and sorcery. And I'm not talking about, obviously, as in a pejorative view of such arts, which of course we also find in the scriptures, in the religious scriptures, but literally such religions performing witchcraft and other magical arts. I've given the example within Christianity, especially within Catholicism, the subtle examples we find in it, and the ones not so subtle. I've talked about this on many occasions, on several videos. And in Islam, it's very much so as well. In fact, Muslims of the Middle Ages didn't seem to be as skirmish as modern Muslims when it comes to witchcraft and other magical arts and sorcery in general. Since a great portion of magic treatises, grimoires and spell books of the Middle Ages and modern period that have had a tremendous influence and weight on the magical arts of our Western society are actually either translations from magic treatises and spell books written by Muslims, or have been influenced by such works from Islamic societies. So it's really not that surprising, or not surprising at all. Witchcraft is often linked to the Jinn as well in the, let's say, Middle East, with many believing sorcerers can summon Jinn to do their bidding. As part of magical work to obtain magic, but also to have these entities aiding on sorcery and witchcraft and other magical arts. This is a good example of the surviving traces of, or the traces of the surviving pre-Islamic animistic perceptions and the construction of relationships with certain spirits to obtain a type of aid from supernatural forces or to acquire help beyond the limits of mundane actions or beyond the limits of the activities within human communities. Of course, with modern and contemporary literature, especially the westernization of these folk tales and belief systems, and no small amount thanks to Disney as well, Jinn have become these sort of wish-granting spirits, like genies inhabiting a lamp or something. But they are much more than that, obviously, and it's fascinating. At least I think it's fascinating, especially as far as Arabian and Islamic mythology goes. And obviously, when things are translated into English, they lose much of their cultural and traditional meanings. As we have seen, or as I've demonstrated in some examples in the case of terms and types of language to address other than human entities and conceptions within animistic beliefs, especially within indigenous societies. I've done this on past videos, I've shown you this. So Jinn translated into English means hidden from sight or the heathen ones, but this practically tells us nothing, right? Actually reminds me of the Icelandic Huldur folk, the heathen people of Icelandic and Scandinavian folklore. But through the etymology of the term, they are much more than just entities hidden, concealed from sight or hiding somewhere, but more to do with the animistic beliefs of other than human persons who usually live in a world similar to ours, but the upside down, in this case, the underground reality, which I've talked about in some other video, which I don't remember, sadly. But that's not important for this case, right? Just to say that the term Jinn, is much more than a heathen spirit, a concealed spirit, and more like sort of a tutelary spirit, or in general, tutelary spirits with which one establishes a relationship with, not in a conscious way, it seems, but something akin to a shamanic experience, and such a spirit person aids in the spirit work. I mean, the very term genies and jinn, as anglicized and romanized forms, respectively, of the jinn, and that already doesn't help understanding the origins of the term, right? But these spirits have played a large part of and in Arabian and later Islamic mythology. Even though Islam has worked hard to get rid of the influences of pre-Islamic beliefs in organized religion, well, folk beliefs still held on, to a certain extent, of course, to the animistic past. And these spirits truly may have been quite important. I mean, otherwise they weren't still mentioned within Islamic mythology, right? There are indeed evidences that the jinn were worshipped by Arabian people during the pre-Islamic period. Curiously, they are seen as mortal, which might attest to the limited relationship with humans as once tutelary spirits, right? But the origins of the jinn remain quite unclear. Of course, some scholars believe they start off as malevolent spirits of the desert and unclean places, and I think that's more of an Islamic view, and spirits who could take animal form as well, while others think they were once pagan deities that fell from grace as other deities became more important. The latter is indeed more probable with the progressive sedentary lifestyle of people who were once nomadic, but with the advancements of agriculture and animal husbandry. It's actually a global religious phenomenon that certain deities linked to settlement activities, particularly male deities, become more important, far more important, as populations become increasingly sedentary and settlements become ever more complex. So spirits and deities of the natural world have the tendency to be cast aside and forgotten, the more human populations focus on settlement, order, law, and military activities to establish and protect the economy. I may speak of this in the future, as it is curious that it was precisely agriculture and herding that together created patriarchy, and henceforth the religious panorama changed drastically. But that's a subject for another time, right? Remind me of that in the future. But anyway, just like all spirits of the wilderness, the Jinn were both worshipped, or at least a certain level of veneration towards them seems to have existed, and they were also feared and thought to be the cause of a variety of diseases and mental illnesses. We see an animistic pattern here, actually, with the mentally ill being described as Majnun, Arabic for jinn possessed or just possessed. Again, this connotation to a probable shamanic experience often linked to insanity and madness, not literally, right, but the process by which one enters an altered state of consciousness to communicate with the spirit world. And as you might imagine, and given the content of this channel, I can't think of a better example to illustrate this as the Proto-Germanic deity, Wodanas, from Wodas, Wodas to be possessed, right, inspired or delirious, a raging frenzy, which associated these gods' attributes to obtaining knowledge and magic power through supernatural means, through altered states of consciousness. I was laughing because Wodas really sounds like a problematic swear word in Portuguese. Anyway, returning to the subject, as far as Islamic theology is concerned, and take this with a grain of salt or wherever, however you say it, because I'm not an avid reader when it comes to Islamism or Islam, and my sole focus here is to understand the animistic perceptions. But well, as I was saying, as far as Islamic theology goes, Jinn have two definitions, right? The first being an object that human sensory organs cannot detect, including angels, demons, and the interior of human beings. And the second being an invisible entity created from smokeless fire by God, who roamed the earth before Adam. The Qur'an states that the Creator, the God, has made many non-earthly life forms that are energy-based. As such life forms are capable of changing shape and form. In addition to human beings, the Qur'an describes two other life forms, angels and jinn. It depicts angels as having originated from light, the source of light is energy, and as lacking free will, they simply obey. And it describes the jinn created from smokeless fire, as preceding the creation of humankind, which was made from mud or clay. This smokeless fire seems to be interpreted as a type of energy, suggesting that unlike humans, which are made from earthly elements, mud and clay, jinn are life forms made from energy itself, or energy sources. It is believed by Muslims that Muhammad was sent as a prophet to both humans and jinn communities. As Arabian folklore and Islamic mythology goes, the jinn were originally sent to live in harmony with humans, but a certain amount of injustice and corruption led to God sending angels to battle the jinn. With the revelation of Islam, they were given another chance at salvation. We see some parallels with Christianity, right? Angels or heaven versus hell, or angels versus demons, right? As the Islamic religion developed, the jinn were, let's say, downgraded from deities, from gods, and possibly also goddesses, to regular spirits. They were placed on the same level as humans and were subject to God's judgment and able to attain futures in paradise or hell. When Islam began to spread outside of Arabia into Africa, Turkey, Iran, and India, beliefs about the jinn also began to develop as they reached different communities, obviously. For instance, Persians linked Jinn to the Deva from Zoroastrian lore and believed they could perform rituals to exorcise them, right? But all depictions of Jinn share certain similarities. For instance, they live in human-like societies, have families, and experience emotions. Now, one particular curious aspect, I wanted to get there before, but well, one particular aspect about the Jinn is that since pre-Islamic Jinn were understood to inhabit close to human societies and indeed interact with humans as energy, life forms, or spirits, or gods, actually pagan gods, King Solomon was gifted by God the ability to talk to Jinn, right? And this particular aspect is curious because, as we read from the Lesser Key of Solomon, even though it's likely to be a late medieval treatise on magic, probably developed in Constantinople with Jewish influence, obviously, what is interesting to notice is that the list of demons in the Ars Goetia and the sigils created by King Solomon himself to trap these demons and spirits of the wilderness to do his bidding, or in terms of to aid in sorcery, many of such entities we know to have been ancient pre-Abrahamic deities. So it's likely that the Jinn, who were once worshipped as energy forces or spirits and were understood as deities, as gods, have become these demons in the Ars Goetia as Judaism and later Christianity and Islam progressively developed and, well, to a certain extent, demonized ancient pagan deities, known as pure spirit energy forces in the world. And with the development of Judaism and Christianity, these Jinn become demons or powerful entities to be summoned and bound and controlled to do one's bidding in terms of sorcery, magic in general. And with Islam, they have become creations of God and bound to its will. So spirits of the wilderness, sources of energy, once worshipped, but also feared. Well, my dear friends, I do hope you have enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. And as always, thank you for today. Until we meet again, my dear friends.